Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. The rain pattered against the window, creating a soothing rhythm as Zachary flipped through the glossy pages of a magazine. His eyes landed on an article that caught his attention, a feature on crossdressing and transgender experiences. As he read, a sense of recognition stirred within him, like pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. Zachary's heart raced as he absorbed the stories and experiences shared in the article. The feelings described resonated deeply with him, echoing thoughts and emotions he had long kept buried. He found himself nodding along, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursing through his veins. Setting the magazine aside, Zachary took a deep breath. He knew he needed to talk to someone about this revelation. His sister Julia had always been his confidant, and he felt she would be the best person to share this with. Gathering his courage, Zachary made his way to Julia's room. He knocked softly on the door, his palms sweaty with nervousness. "Come in," Julia called from inside. Zachary entered, finding his sister sprawled on her bed, surrounded by textbooks and notebooks. She looked up, a smile spreading across her face as she saw him. "Hey, Zach, what's up?" Zachary hesitated, his words catching in his throat. I need to talk to you about something important." Julia sat up, sensing the seriousness in her brother's tone. She patted the spot next to her on the bed, inviting him to sit. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Zachary settled beside her, his hands fidgeting in his lap. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "I just read an article about cross-dressing and transgender experiences, and I think I might be, like that." Julia's eyes widened slightly, but her expression remained open and supportive. She reached out and placed a comforting hand on Zachary's arm. "Thank you for sharing that with me, Zach. How are you feeling about it?" Zachary's shoulders relaxed a bit, relieved by his sister's calm response.
"Scared, mostly, but also excited. It's like I finally have words for something I've felt for a long time."
Julia nodded, giving his arm a gentle squeeze.
"That must be a big realization. Do you want to talk more about it?"
Zachary nodded, feeling a rush of gratitude for his sister's understanding.
"I've always felt different, like I was playing a role that didn't quite fit. When I read those stories, it was like looking into a mirror for the first time."
Julia listened attentively as Zachary poured out his feelings, describing the disconnect he'd felt with his body and the longing he'd experienced to express himself in a more feminine way. As he spoke, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, years of pent-up emotions finally finding release. When he finished, Julia pulled him into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you for opening up about this, Zach. And I want you to know that I love you and support you no matter what." Zachary felt tears prick at his eyes, overwhelmed by the acceptance and love from his sister. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Julia pulled back, a mischievous glint in her eye. "So, little brother, or should I say little sister, how would you like to explore this side of yourself a bit more?" Zachary's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "Well," Julia said, hopping off the bed and heading to her closet, "I happen to have a pretty extensive wardrobe and makeup collection. How about we give you a little makeover?" Zachary felt a mix of excitement and nervousness flutter in his stomach. "Really? You do that for me?" Julia grinned, already pulling out dresses and skirts. "Of course, that's what big sisters are for, right?" For the next few hours, Julia's room transformed into a whirlwind of fabric, makeup, and laughter. She helped Zachary try on different outfits, teaching him how to walk in heels and apply makeup. With each passing moment, Zachary felt more and more like his true self emerging. Finally, Julia stepped back, admiring her handiwork. "Take a look," she said softly, gesturing towards the full-length mirror on her closet door. Zachary turned, his breath catching in his throat as he saw his reflection. The person staring back at him was still recognizably him, but softer, more feminine. He wore a flowing blue dress that complemented his eyes, his face expertly made up to enhance his natural features. For the first time, he felt like he was seeing his true self. "What do you think?" Julia asked, watching her siblings' reaction carefully. Zachary couldn't speak for a moment, overcome with emotion. When he finally found his voice, it was barely above a whisper. I love it. This feels right," Julia beamed, pulling her sibling into another hug. "You look beautiful." "How does it feel?" Zachary twirled slowly, watching the dress swirl around his legs. "It feels amazing. Like I'm finally me." As they stood there, basking in the moment, a thought occurred to Zachary. "Julia, what about Sarah? How do I tell her about this?" Sarah was Zachary's girlfriend of 2 years, a kind and understanding young woman who had always been supportive of Zachary. Still, this was a big revelation, and Zachary couldn't help but worry about her reaction. Julia considered this for a moment. "Well, Sarah loves you for who you are. I think if you're honest with her, she'll understand. Do you want me to be there when you tell her?" Zachary nodded gratefully. "Yes, please, I think that would help." They decided to invite Sarah over that evening. As they waited for her arrival, Zachary changed back into his regular clothes, though he kept the makeup on. He paced nervously in the living room, rehearsing what he wanted to say in his head. When the doorbell rang, Zachary froze. Julia gave him an encouraging smile before going to answer the door. Sarah entered, her long brown hair slightly damp from the rain outside. Her eyes immediately found Zachary, and she tilted her head curiously, noticing the makeup. "Zach, what's going on?" Zachary took a deep breath, steeling himself. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something important. Can we sit down?" Sarah nodded, her brow furrowed with concern as they settled on the couch. Julia perched on a nearby armchair, offering silent support. Zachary reached out and took Sarah's hands in his own. "Sarah, I've recently realized something about myself. I think I might be transgender." Sarah's eyes widened, but she didn't pull her hands away. "Oh, Zach, how long have you known?" "I just figured it out today," Zachary admitted. "But I think I've felt this way for a long time. I just didn't have the words for it before." Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then she squeezed Zachary's hands gently. "Thank you for telling me. This must have been really hard for you." Zachary felt a wave of relief wash over him. "You're not upset?" Sarah shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "Of course not. I love you, Zach. This doesn't change that. I just want you to be happy and true to yourself." Zachary felt tears welling up in his eyes again. He pulled Sarah into a tight hug, overwhelmed by the love and acceptance he was receiving. When they pulled apart, Sarah wiped a tear from Zachary's cheek. "So what now? How can I support you?" Julia chimed in from her spot in the armchair. "Actually, I gave Zach a bit of a makeover earlier. Would you like to see?" Sarah's eyes lit up with interest. "Really? I'd love to." With an encouraging nod from Sarah, Zachary retreated to Julia's room to change back into the blue dress. When he emerged, Sarah's jaw dropped. "Wow," she breathed, taking in the sight of her partner. "You look amazing." Zachary blushed, smoothing down the front of the dress nervously. "Really? You think so?" Sarah stood up and walked over to Zachary, taking his hands once more. "Absolutely. You look beautiful. And more importantly, you look happy." Zachary felt a warmth spread through his chest at Sarah's words. He leaned in and kissed her softly, feeling truly accepted for who he was. As they broke apart, Sarah's eyes sparkled with excitement. "You know what we should do? We should go shopping. Get you some clothes of your own." Julia bounced up from her chair, clapping her hands together. "That's a great idea. We could make a day of it." Zachary looked between his sister and his girlfriend. feeling a surge of love for both of them. "That sounds wonderful, but I don't know if I'm ready to go out like this yet." Sarah squeezed his hand reassuringly. "That's okay. We can start small. Maybe just try on some things in the store." Zachary nodded, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement at the prospect. "Okay, let's do it." The next day, the trio set out for the mall. Zachary wore his usual clothes, but Julia had helped him style his hair in a slightly more feminine way, and he wore a touch of mascara. As they walked through the bustling shopping center, Zachary felt his heart racing, both from anxiety and anticipation. They made their way to a clothing store that Julia assured them had a good selection of women's clothing. As they browsed the racks, Sarah and Julia picked out various items for Zachary to try on. In the safety of the changing room, Zachary felt a thrill as he slipped on a soft floral blouse. He emerged shyly, twirling for Sarah and Julia.
"That looks great on you,"
Sarah exclaimed, her eyes shining with pride. Julia nodded in agreement. "The color really brings out your eyes." Encouraged by their reactions, Zachary tried on more outfits. With each new look, he felt more comfortable, more like himself. By the end of their shopping trip, he had a small collection of feminine clothes that felt truly his own. As they left the mall, bags in hand, Zachary felt a sense of lightness he'd never experienced before. He turned to Sarah and Julia, his eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you both so much for today. I don't know what I'd do without you." Sarah leaned in. "We're here for you. Always." Julia nodded, throwing an arm around her sibling's shoulders.
"That's right. And this is just the beginning of your journey."
As they drove home, Zachary felt a sense of excitement for what the future held. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but with the support of his loved ones, he felt ready to face them. Over the next few weeks, Zachary spent more and more time exploring his feminine side. He practiced applying makeup, experimented with different hairstyles, and grew more comfortable in his new clothes. With each passing day, he felt more like his true self. One evening, as Zachary, now increasingly thinking of herself as Brielle, sat in her room, there was a knock at the door. Her mother's voice called out, "Zachary, can I come in?" Brielle froze. She was dressed in a cute sundress, her face carefully made up. She hadn't yet found the courage to tell her parents about her gender identity.
"Just a minute,"
she called out, frantically looking around for something to cover up with. But before she could change, the door opened and her mother stepped in. Brielle braced herself for shock, confusion, or worse. Instead, her mother's face softened into a gentle smile. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "You look beautiful." Brielle felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Mom, you're not mad?" Her mother crossed the room and pulled her into a tight hug. "Of course not, my love. I've known for a while that something was different. I was just waiting for you to be ready to tell me." Brielle buried her face in her mother's shoulder, overwhelmed with relief and love. "How did you know?" Her mother pulled back, cupping Brielle's face in her hands. "A mother always knows. And I have a bit of experience with this, actually. There's someone I think you should meet." Confused, Brielle followed her mother downstairs. In the living room, she found a woman she'd never seen before. The woman stood as they entered, a warm smile on her face. "Zachary, this is your Aunt Sienna," her mother said. "She's been wanting to meet you for a long time." Aunt Sienna stepped forward, her eyes twinkling. "Hello, dear. Though I have a feeling Zachary might not be the name you're going by these days." Brielle felt a rush of understanding. There was something familiar about Aunt Sienna, a shared experience that she could sense. "I've been thinking of going by Brielle," she admitted softly. Aunt Sienna's smile widened. "Brielle, that's a beautiful name. It suits you." As they sat down, Aunt Sienna shared her own story of transition. Brielle listened in awe, feeling a deep connection to this woman she'd just met. Here was someone who truly understood what she was going through. "I'm so glad your mother called me," Aunt Sienna said, reaching out to squeeze Brielle's hand. "I want you to know that you're not alone in this journey. You have a whole family behind you." Brielle looked around at her mother and aunt, feeling a surge of love and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "This means more to me than you can know." As the evening wore on, they talked and laughed, sharing stories and advice. Brielle felt a sense of belonging she'd never experienced before. This was her family, accepting her for who she truly was. Later that night, as Brielle lay in bed, she reflected on how much her life had changed in such a short time. From the moment she'd read that magazine article, it was as if a dam had broken, releasing a flood of self-discovery and acceptance. She thought about Julia, who had been there from the very beginning, offering unwavering support and sisterly advice. She thought about Sarah, whose love had only grown stronger through this journey. She thought about her mother, who had known and accepted her even before she'd found the courage to come out. And she thought about Aunt Sienna, a beacon of hope and understanding in this new world she was entering. Brielle knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, both personal and societal. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly, completely herself. And with the love and support of her family and friends, she knew she could face whatever came her way. As she drifted off to sleep, Brielle smiled to herself. Tomorrow was a new day, and she couldn't wait to face it as her authentic self. The next morning, Brielle woke up feeling refreshed and excited. She took her time getting ready, carefully applying her makeup and choosing an outfit that made her feel confident and beautiful. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw the person she'd always known she was meant to be. Downstairs, she found her mother in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Her mom looked up as she entered, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Good morning, sweetheart. How are you feeling today?" Brielle returned the smile, feeling a rush of affection for her mother. "I'm feeling great, Mom. Really great." As they sat down to eat, Brielle's phone buzzed with a text from Julia. "Hey, sis, Sarah and I were thinking of going out tonight. Want to join us?" Brielle felt a flutter of excitement in her stomach. She'd been out in public as herself a few times now, but always during the day for short trips. The idea of going out at night, to a club perhaps, was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. "What do you think, Mom?" she asked, showing her the text. "Do you think I'm ready for something like that?" Her mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Brielle, honey, you're ready for whatever you feel comfortable doing. Just remember to stay safe and call me if you need anything, okay?" Feeling bolstered by her mother's support, Brielle texted back, "I'm in. Where are we going?" The response came quickly. "There's a new club downtown that's supposed to be really inclusive. We thought it might be a good place for your first big night out. We'll pick you up at 8. Oh." The rest of the day passed in a blur of anticipation. Brielle spent hours getting ready, trying on different outfits and perfecting her makeup. By the time Julia and Sarah arrived, she was a bundle of nervous energy. "Wow, Brielle!" Sarah exclaimed as she entered the room. "You look incredible." Brielle blushed, smoothing down her sparkly top. "Thanks, I'm a little nervous." Julia came over and gave her a hug. "You've got nothing to be nervous about. You're going to have an amazing time." As they drove to the club, Brielle felt her nerves slowly giving way to excitement. The city lights blurred past the window, and she could feel the beat of the music before they even reached their destination. The club was already packed when they arrived. Brielle hesitated for a moment at the entrance, but Sarah took her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this," she whispered. Inside, the music was pulsing, the dance floor a sea of moving bodies. Brielle felt overwhelmed for a moment, but then she looked at Julia and Sarah, saw their encouraging smiles, and felt a surge of confidence. They made their way to the bar where Julia ordered them all drinks. As they sipped their cocktails, Brielle began to relax, letting the music and the atmosphere wash over her. "Want to dance?" Sarah asked, holding out her hand. Brielle nodded, allowing herself to be led onto the dance floor. At first, she felt self-conscious, worried about how she looked or if people were staring. But as she moved to the music, those worries melted away. She was just another girl out dancing with her girlfriend, and it felt wonderful. Thanks for watching. Check out Patreon if you want to have early access to the other parts. If not, it will be online in a couple of days.